Are you filled with fear, doubt, worry about the future of our country? Do you feel the urgency to act before it's too late? If yes, then this podcast is for you. It's time for us to confront the critical issues threatening our nation's fabric, our democracy itself, regardless of our political stance. If you are ready to face reality, handle the tough questions, and find real solutions, then here's your host, Debilyn.
Welcome to the Terrified Nation podcast. I'm your host, Debilyn. Can we save it? That's the question that we're exploring in this podcast series. And for me, the answer is a resounding yes, we can. And we must. This show is where we explore alternatives to being afraid. And we ask ourselves the questions, now what? As we interview guests who have gone from being afraid or angry or hopeless even, to become advocates for our nation so that we might live into the promise of our founders, each one of us dedicating ourselves to a better future. And I do like to start each show with a question that we'll explore together or to keep in mind as we go through the interview. And today's question is, how might the arts inform our future? And so joining us today is Mi'jan Celie Tho-Biaz, who has a doctor's of education. She's also a Kennedy Center citizen artist and an expert speaker for the U.S. Department of State who moves between the realms of oral history, art, ritual, and education to produce meaningful, forward-facing cultural projects and events. You can see why I wanted her to join us here today. As a 2023-2024 Andrew W. Mellon Foundation short-term fellow, Mi'jan is researching speculative fiction author Octavia E. Butler's archives at the Huntington Library. One of Mi'jan's greatest joys is connecting to audiences through her visionary, story-rich talks at a range of institutions, from Carnegie Hall to the Institute of the American Indian Arts to South by Southwest. Making history contemporary, personal, and futures dependent, she surfaces the stories that need to be heard. And today, we're surfacing hers. So, Mi'jan, welcome to Terrified Nation.
Well, first off, thank you, Debilyn, for the invitation and also for the work that you put forward out in our world. I say that I'm a cultural worker. My background is as an oral historian and a culturally responsive educator, program designer. I really believe it's like just a fancy way of saying I get a chance to write love letters and to read them.
Future visioning. Could you say a little bit about your project with Octavia Butler?
I am beyond grateful. I'm an Octavia E. Butler scholar, and I received a short-term fellowship award through the Huntington Library, where Octavia's archives are held, her physical archives. So I spend roughly 3 months a year in her archives, just doing research in an effort to figure out and then share with the world, what is it perhaps that BIPOC visionaries need in terms of the conditions of archiving their legacy work, where the archive is functioning as a site, a genuine site of stewardship and care, conscious care. And I'm learning so much because, Octavia was a pioneer in speculative fiction and science fiction. Most people consider her to be the first Black American woman sci-fi speculative fiction writer. I definitely consider her to be such, one of the pioneers in terms of Afrofuturism. And when people ask me, well, what exactly does speculative fiction mean? The thing that I like to share is just this tagline question: what is possible? What is possible in our future? What is possible for the future?
And I think that's the part that we're talking about here in this interview, is not only conceiving of a future, but then conceiving of a way to navigate there.
Thank you.
But it's a place where we interview guests about what their preferred future is. And we go through some standard questions that's part of a larger research project to catalog and quantify what Americans want for themselves and for their own lives. And so, Mi'jan, as we go through this interview today, this is about your preferred future, not what you think is likely or probable, but what you really want, what's your heart's desire for yourself. And so we're going to do some time travel in true Octavia style. We're going to go somewhere in the future. Now, we're not going to go quite as far as she did. We recommend somewhere between 2 and 20 years. And what sounds right for you? You can pick any number you want.
2
2
years.
Okay.
Because that's very concrete.
Very, very much so. So let's get into our handy dandy Zoom time machine here and set the dial for, I'm going to set it for early 2027, because even though we're recording this in late 2024, it's going to be released in early 2025.
Perfect.
So
let's go.
let's settle in as we get into, let's take a few deep breaths here as the time machine takes us to this early 2027 time period. And when we get there, this is really critical. You're going to observe your 2-year older self. You're going to remain who you are today, but you're going to just observe who you have become. And then respond to those questions with what you observe. You ready?
Yes.
All right, we're pulling into the 2027 station and ding! We're going to climb out of our Zoom time capsule here. And the first question that we really want to know is like, where are you in 2027?
I am still in the United States part-time, and I am still in Central America part-time. That's where I am right now. I find this balance, of course I do for work, travel to South America, EU. I find this balance to be the most restorative for me. I live in both places purposefully, not just by happenstance, and rooted to deep core community.
So I want to get a little bit more specific and share with me in 2027, as you're observing your 2-year older self and you're still living part-time in the US, where in the US, and part-time in Central America, where in Central America?
New York City in the US. And I'm currently in Oaxaca. I love being in Oaxaca.
So what about New York is keeping you in New York part of the time? And what about Oaxaca or the new place is going to keep you there?
The seeds that have already been planted that get an opportunity to grow a bit and propagate will reach a fruition space, that can be shared in 2027 that I want to see. I don't want to, like who wants to be the farmer and they never get an opportunity to hang out in the harvest season? Yeah, like give me a break. What's the point? No, you want all the seasons.
All right. So we're going to come back to what you're harvesting in 2 years. And it's not that it may have happened, it's that it did happen. So just like keep that in mind. And I just want to note, like, we're talking about largely, it sounds like your professional life. And is there anything personal you want to add, or is that too much for a podcast?
You know what, actually, there's one, that's interesting you said that. There's one friend who I reached out during those very first months. His name is Josh, of the pandemic, when everything was locking down. And I said, you know what? I really deeply believe that there is a future beyond this pandemic. And when it's safe to travel again, I want you to be one of the very first people to connect me to new relationships. And I'm not talking romantically. I just mean my people, my core people. And I sent this to a handful of folks, and he was the very first one who took that so seriously. And he said, I know your next 3 friends. I know your next 3 sister friends for certain. And one of them is in New York. And it's not that we've spent a lot of time together or anything like that. She's one of these people who is a great public artist and a musician. And, I just have deep admiration for the beautiful creative work that she ripples into the world, and that it was like a call and response. She heard that call, and immediately the next time I was in New York, she's like, please, we're spending the day together. This is not a joke. I want to know you. I think you might want to know me. here's where we're going to eat. This is the music we're going to go see live. And so that is, yes, that's what we're witnessing in 2027.
Oh, I love that. And I love that. I also have one of those artist friends who I only see her maybe 4 times a year, but it is so soul filling and enriching for both of us.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
right.
also the place that my best friend in the whole world loves to visit me. She loves visiting me in New York, and she loves visiting me in Oaxaca. So I'm like, yes, this is perfect. Great. Done and done.
Well, really cool. So let's get back to like observing your 2027 self. And I want to know, what are you most proud of?
That I made good on a promise. I think about Octavia E. Butler and that she passed away very early. When you read these snippets, she writes, you'll see them in like the back cover of some of her books. And I think also a public interview where she says, I was a 6-year-old writer who became a 30-something-year-old writer who one day will be an 80-year-old writer. And she died, I believe, at the age of 58.
Mm.
And while she was prolific and a trailblazer, the one thing that I so wish is that she had a much longer, healthy life that she could enjoy. In terms of harvest season, I wish that she had enough years of harvest season within her own life. And I think about in my family, how most people are definitely, they definitely pass away before their 80th birthday. And I want different for myself. I want that healthy, abundant, long life. And so what I say to myself that I'm most proud of is that I continued to cultivate these choices around my values. I believe, though, the choices, consciously making those choices that center my well-being at the foundation that gets to ripple and permeate through everything else.
Yeah.
I actually get to be alive and healthy. That is a foundation. And I make choices based on that, which means I don't overwork, which means that I think through, wow, can I take on this project? Oh, it requires 80 hours a week of work and it pays me $2. Probably not.
Right. And and recognizing that there are people who feel like that is the choice they have to make.
Sure.
But I hear what you're most proud of is knowing yourself well enough and what's healthy for you, that you have made consistent choices throughout your life where you can center health and wellness as your foundation.
The remainder of my days, because my choices up until this year have not been that. That's why I'm saying that. I'm moving closer and closer to, I know I look young. I always say this. However, I'm moving pretty close to retirement age. And so, like, if not now, I mean, that I would wait until I'm a senior citizen, the next decade, basically, of my life? Like, come on. Who am I living for?
Well, once we stop recording, we'll have to trade ages. But we won't do that here, okay?
Skincare tips.
Yeah. Again, we're observing your 2-year-older self in 2027. And walk me through like how you spend an average day. And maybe pick one in New York and one in your central.
Oh, okay. All right. New York, more work-centered. And really, it's container of love letter. I'm either interviewing people, writing about those interviews, researching my interviewees, as well as, though, what is very important for me to witness in terms of harvest season 2 years from now is I'm also receiving real love letters from my partner, my chosen romantic life partner. There's something different about being the one writing love letters as a vocation.
Yes.
And then personally, romantically receiving that same sort of essence of goodness, right? And so that's the day-to-day stuff. I am good about in Oaxaca, so we can jump to this. I'm really great about having a very clearly defined end work day time And part of that is because my community of relationships here and the rhythm of especially creatives here, cultural workers, cultural heritage workers, eating. There's a ritual around eating and seeing your people. And okay, you don't schedule Zooms after 4 p.m. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right. That would be
so
silly because you'd be infringing upon your soul-filling food time.
exactly. And the people, I think there's a gratitude, an inherent gratitude that's baked in, which is the gratitude of the food, the people who actually spent the time to grow your food, and the hands. I am friends with a chef here. I know how long these meals take to make and to
Right.
share. And so, wow, to miss out on purpose. And you never want to disappoint a chef who loves you. You really don't.
Like really deep wisdom.
You really don't. You really don't, because they start calling you and texting you nonstop. Why are you not here? And I don't own a car here, so I walk everywhere. I know how long it takes to get to the table. So yeah, so I would say the day-to-day in Oaxaca is really around those shared meal times with loved ones.
Mm. And so this is rolling right into the next question, which is, again, remembering we're observing your 2-year older self in New York and in Oaxaca both. How will you feel most of the time? What do you observe?
Grateful. And the way that I contextualize this is still that love letter, not metaphor, reality. I still own, like have my very first love letter that I ever received. And I kept wondering, like, why? You know, this was 8th grade Mi'jan. Like, why do I have this? Like, first off, like, oh my God, so young. Like, what 8th grade boy is writing love letters? You know what I mean? However, it helps me to remember in my sort of archive of things that I find most important to me. It reminds me of that very first innocent feeling of gratitude that someone took the time and energy to write exactly how they felt about me. And I think about that with the 3 people who in my life wrote love letters to me the longest. My dad, who passed away in 2023, but every my children's birthday, holiday, he made sure that there was a handwritten card. And you're talking about somebody who had a stroke and a permanent disability that took his right hand writing away. It just was that important, that important. I think about my grandma's baby sister who passed away a couple of months before my dad in 2023, which was so hard. And she wrote consistent love letters to me via email. However, the same essence. And I'm like, again and again, I just keep thinking, so grateful, because inherent in the love letter writing and receiving is being chosen by love, being chosen by conscious care. It's the best. And so that is the feeling, this gratitude, this deep, profound, beyond surface area, right to the heart of my core gratitude.
And so I want to back up a little bit because I think I kind of accidentally glossed over like the depth of love letters in your life. Can you explain a little bit about when you say love letters, how did this come to be your life?
God, that is
And
such
then
a
we'll
great
go back to
question.
future focus. But right now, I just think it's really important for context setting.
You know, because that's so weird that my mind went to, I also received unkind letters from people who I deeply loved. And I remember thinking, you know, as a young adult, like, wow, where is this coming from? What is this? And I wonder if it's now as a more mature adult, I can ask myself a more reflective question like, okay, the beauty as well as the tension in terms of the challenge of receiving someone else's written words about how they feel based on who you are in their life. is that there's interpretation that can happen. And so it's this one-sided communication where, yeah, if it's profound gratitude and love and care, oh, that feels so great because you can, play it and replay it over and over and over again. It's a material, tangible, archival item. I mean, I've read not Octavia's love letters, however, in her archive, I just spent maybe 2 weeks reading all of her not all, but the written correspondence that I could find. And it's like, these are the things that were the most important or urgent, or for one reason or another, saved. There's something that's important about this, that it was saved across years and archived, saved across her lifetime. And I feel like most of us operate the same way, whether it's notebooks or wedding invitations. Think about the things that still make its way to us in this digital age, where there is a materiality to it. And so love letters across my lifetime, I just always saved them because they were gifts. They were physical gifts, not something someone had to buy. It didn't, a card, yes, maybe there were a few dollars, and a stamp, yes, a few cents. However, it's one of those accessible things for the most part. And yet it's so rare. It's so rare.
I have in a cabinet behind me, like every letter that I have ever received.
Oh my goodness.
It was mailed to me. And I haven't added to that collection for a while because, I haven't saved the cards because most of them don't have things written in them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also interesting just to hear you think about correspondence as love letters, whether it's a harsh word or, a challenging, tension-filled document or, in sense of correspondence, or whether it's like, hey, here's how my day went. The fact that people are writing to us, I have hundreds of thousands of emails, of course.
Of course.
But I haven't printed those out and saved them in the same way that a handwritten letter has been saved.
Right.
But I'm also reflecting, just as you're saying this, that when a short tangent here, my family hangs out in the kind of antique store mall places, right? So when I go to visit part of my family, we go to these antique store malls, and I don't really collect things in the same way that they collect things. And so I was looking for something that I could collect to be part of the group, right? And so I decided to collect postcards, partially because I have a great aunt who had a postcard collection, some beautiful pieces in there, by the way. But as I was going through like the tens of thousands of postcards that are in these antique malls, I am attracted to the ones that have writing on them. Not for the sake of the picture. I want the sake of the communication and the correspondence. And I love the way you're framing these as love letters. So thank you for that.
Because there's a bit of poetic detective work that can happen there. Are they writing to a loved one, family member? Is this official correspondence or informal? How intimate is the sentiment that is being carried forward in the message? Is this romantic? Like, there's so many things. Just like, it's the crush territory, I would say, of correspondence,
Yeah. Yeah. So I just want just before we get on to the next question, just thank you. Thank you for that little
oh, of course.
Awareness. Yeah. So we're about halfway through the interview right now. And this next question is, as you're observing your 2027 self, what can you identify as your three to five, it's an arbitrary number, priority values, or you might say qualities?
Intimacy. The more I interview people, and even doing this archival work with Octavia's, around her legacy, the more I'm looking at, not tension exactly, it can be that, what's public, why, what's private, and why. And so I realize people all the time, Lord, because I do these, doing air quotes for anybody who's listening, I write these love letters that I perform as keynotes. And I'm telling you, folks either are laughing and or crying, and they feel deeply connected to me. And the irony is, the last therapist I had said, you know what? That's really cool that you do that on stage. However, I'm listening week after week to your therapy, and there's a part that has to translate into your personal life for the texture of your relationships, your romantic relationships, to really have genuine intimacy and vulnerability. You're going to have to let your guard down. Yes, it requires discernment, and you're going to learn like who is good to trust, and pacing and all that kind of stuff, and the difference between dopamine and oxytocin and et cetera, right? And so for me, as a result, I really truly center intimacy now. I feel like that is a superpower.
Yep.
And in 2027, as we're stepped off the Zoom time machine, that's one of the core values that we see in place in Mi'jan 2027. So I'll say that.
Okay.
Humor. I love humor. I feel like, my God, either personal life, community life, day-to-day life, as well as the world, so much tension. And it's one of the things in my personal life and my family of origin. I come from jokesters, and it just helps. It makes the ride called life that much easier to accompany and participate in. So humor is another one. And then I would say, as far as core values that continue, generosity. And I'm going to, I think what I finally, actually, courtesy of my romantic life and the people who I've dated in the last year, I'm starting to recognize the difference between someone who has material abundance,
Yep,
as well as someone who has material abundance and publicly gives, as well as the discernible difference between someone who has, regardless, material abundance or not, however, has a generous heart, and it does not matter the environment, whether it's public or private. They genuinely give. They're givers. And so I really, truly aspire to be that consistently, as well as to curate my closest relationships in that way.
so your future self it has observable priority values that are intimacy, humor, and generosity.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. And I love all those distinctions. So I want you to take a look around both your New York and your Oaxaca community and think about what do those communities need to include or provide for your future life to be possible.
It's a continuation. It's not a new thing that we're observing. New York, I want the exact same foundation, not necessarily how it looks, how it feels, as the container around my Los Angeles living when I'm there in Octavia's archives. There's this great thing that I've been observing. Archives that are part typically of cultural institutions, museums, botanical gardens, that kind of thing, as a basic premise, because it's either a tourist destination or it has to welcome paying visitors, they are very welcoming, and they're also protective.
Yes.
And so that is exactly what I want in my New York City. That's what we're witnessing. My New York City life is protected, welcoming, inclusive, and also expansive. I really value that because I'm a curious person. Same thing for Oaxaca. There's this extra layer, though. I do these culinary story events called Story Feast Suppers. And the chef here in Oaxaca, who I'm friends with, Aurelia, is a very, very, very close, dear, beloved friend. And one thing she said as we were creating the menu and then going through the event that has stayed with me and will until I draw my last breath: let me love you. Let me love you. There is a surrender that's required, as well as trust, as well as, I just like started tearing up. That
So
is
did I.
it's so much easier when the person who is saying that embodies true, what I call love genius.
Mhm.
Love genius. Of course, I want to surrender to the person who is a love genius and knows how to care. So those are the two communities. That's what it
So
feels like. And I can say, though, the gap, because your podcast is called Terrified Nation. I want to remix it for myself and move from terrified to brave.
oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
The gap that I currently experience that 2027 Mi'jan has, like a DJ. I remixed it. There's some alchemy here.
Absolutely.
I realize there's something that has happened with my values that I've inherited and carried forward, instead of perhaps taking a second to say, okay, and how am I evolving based on how important and meaningful this is in my current life and future self that I most wish to embody. Financial resourcing. I feel like, especially for women of color, we know, I mean, many of us know where we are in terms of financial capacity of either intergenerational wealth and or earning capacities, just based on how things are in the United States. I can't speak for other countries. And so I think about, wow, I've been so rooted, especially in the nonprofit sector, and also because I do this hybrid academic work, I have not, if I'm being honest, done a good job. Like, if I was a mother or an auntie to Mi'jan, I have not done a good job of protecting my financial well-being and making choices from there. I have done an outstanding job of saying, who needs me? Okay, I'm definitely going to show up. This community has articulated da 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 da. And it took me, I hope it's okay to say, a dear sister friend, Kim. She works predominantly, she is Lakota, and she works predominantly in Indian country. And she said, Mi'jan, Native American communities are typically some of the most financially under-resourced.
Yes.
You know, as well as I do, though, every time that you choose to work in Indian country, even if they don't have enough financial money to support the project fully, you will always, if you're flying somewhere, getting on a train, whatever, somebody is coming to pick you up. You will always be fed. You don't have to wonder, oh my God, the hotel, how much is this? She said, it's not a volunteer effort where you're somehow not just the volunteer, but the donor too. Like, come on, we're talking about labor, paid labor. And so she said, so if Indian country can treat you like this and meet you here, what's the excuse for everybody else who has more financial resources? So I'm just saying that in terms of this gap, almost like we're getting off a train, literally 2027 Mi'jan already mined. Yeah, you know, they have that phrase, mind the gap. The gap's already been mined. Don't worry about it.
There is no gap.
No gap.
There's no gap. Well, and I just want to circle that back to your spirit of generosity that you mentioned earlier, because what you're describing from your friend Kim in Indian country is a generous spirit.
Yeah.
Regardless of material wealth.
1,000,000%. I've never been hungry. I've never had to lug equipment. I have been met with true care. That's what I can say. True care. Yeah.
And that to me is worth so much.
100%.
That's priceless. That's a priceless thing to
100%.
provide true care. That's what your friend in Oaxaca says when she says, let me love you.
Yeah.
It's that true care element that's been, that we all crave and we can provide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're down to this last question here. Is there anything that you can do today or in the near future, or that you're already doing, to influence or co-create that community that's going to support you in 2027?
Yes, I'm taking a step out on faith a little bit. There is a fantastic writer, scholar, community public scholar named Alexis Pauline Gumbs. She wrote, recently released in fall, I think 2024, Audre Lorde's biography called Survival is a Promise.
Mm.
And I had an opportunity to meet her at Audre Lorde's 90th birthday celebration in Pittsburgh. We were both at the Carnegie Museum of Art. A dear sister friend of mine, who's a community archivist, curated this beautiful day-long celebration. And I had a question about working with archives with BIPOC visionary women, because she worked in Audre Lorde's archives. I'm researching Octavia E. Butler. And I sent this question, and before she had an opportunity to respond, there was an autoresponder, because as I'm sure you guessed, like book tour time is, oh my goodness, you can't catch anyone. So here's this autoresponder, and it's the second time that I've had a communication with Alexis Pauline Gumbs, where there's an autoresponder that is so loving, careful, kind, and meticulous. It's transparent. It's letting me, the reader, the recipient, it's a love letter, if I'm being honest. Yeah. It's letting me know, this is what's going on in my life. Here's how you can, if you just miss my voice, you can catch it here. If you'd like to work together, here. If you'd like to listen to me read the book, here. If you'd like to pick it, like, it's very meticulous. And I realized, wait a minute, it's the second time in my life of receiving an Alexis Pauline Gumbs auto reply where I'm using it as a template for my future life that I wish to activate. And so I'm so grateful, winter hiatus. I do a winter hiatus every year, no matter how small or large, I still carve out the time. And I said, this year, I'm writing my out of office email auto reply, not just recapping 2024. I'm going to do something intimate and vulnerable and share, this is the 2025 that I'm calling in, with a call to action. So not just, oh, this person is receiving it. It's like, no, this is a love letter, call and response.
Yes. I love that. I love that that's what you're going to do. And I have to say, though, I used to have an out-of-office autoresponder because I took Fridays off to write.
Oh, ooh.
And I was a little playful with it. And I have to tell you that I got more comments from people who then emailed me on Friday, who then in the future did not email me on Friday.
Can you share that with me? Please share the message.
I will. If I can find it, I will share it with you. But yeah, it was just so, yeah, it was like, and I need some time to not be like bombarded with phone calls and emails.
Yes.
Friday, I'm checking my email.
Tethering oneself to the email inbox is definitely not the way to be a meaningful, generative creative, if I have to say, in my experience. I might be the only one.
Like I could write something, or I could respond to the 5 emails that just came in. Yeah, there's something about that. So I want to conclude our interview with an invitation.
Okay.
And this invitation is to spend 5 minutes a day thinking about Mi'jan 2027 and feeling those feelings, including in a sense of awe and wonder. Because neuroscience is showing us that when we have awe and wonder in our life, we are happier and we will begin to subconsciously make choices that will create that future that we want. This is how we actually advance ourselves and our nation. And so the choice is ours. So that's my invitation to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Invitation accepted.
All right, Mi'jan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Debilyn.
And if anyone out in listening to Terrified Nation would like to participate in this research project, because the interview that Mi'jan just did is part of a national research project, you can go to americanfuture.us and click on Share Your Future Story, and it takes you through all the same questions. So in closing today's show, I would like to thank you, the listeners of Terrified Nation, for giving a damn. We may be a terrified nation today, but we can do better. We can create a better future. We can save the United States. Join me next time.
So that's it for today's episode of Terrified Nation. Head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen to subscribe to the show. You can get advance notice of new episodes and bonus content by signing up. Head over to terrifiednation.com and join us on the next episode.